Welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. We're glad you joined us. I'm here along with Kent Myers, and as you know, we're back every week discussing topical issues and meeting interesting people. And last week we had our 800th show, and so start another show today knowing it's number 801, so congratulations.
Well, same to you. Yeah. Let's hope for another 800 somehow or another. Today we're going to be talking with Dr. Keith Gaddie, the chairman of the Political Science Department at the University of Oklahoma, about presidential and other elections.
Yeah, and it's so many different things to talk about, but Keith is one of our local experts, and we'll get his take on the political world and the specific aspect of the voting process. Are we doing it as efficiently and as accurately as we could? It's all coming up today on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
Fortunate enough to premiere every film that I've produced at Sundance. Seeing your film on the big screen for the first time in front of an audience at the Sundance Film Festival is unmatched. I'm Chad Burris. I'm an attorney, a film producer, film financier, economic development financier, and I'm Chickasaw. Nobody can argue that modern day media, cinema, has perpetuated this myth, this idea of the Indian and what that is. And just the idea that, all Indians look one way or all Indians act one way is a terrible injustice. Being able to have filmmakers tell stories that are representative of some element of his surroundings, his upbringing, what they know, what they see through their own eyes, that other people get a chance to bear witness to around the world. I think that's amazing. For me personally, being an Indian today means being responsible, honest, progressive, and giving that back to the community.
Learn more about today's Chickasaws at profilesofenation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett along with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we're really thrilled to welcome back to the set of The Verdict Dr. Keith Gaddie, the chairman of the Political Science Department at the University of Oklahoma. Keith did his undergraduate work at the University of Georgia, at Florida State, got his PhD at the University of Georgia. He's been at the University of Oklahoma now for going on 20 years. He's an author, a lecturer. He has co-authored or edited 20 books on political science and related topics, and this is his 7th appearance on The Verdict. Keith, welcome back.
Hey, it's good to be back, gentlemen. Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Boy, there's a lot going on politically, if you can stand it. What's your take as a person whose kind of job is to keep an eye on all this and keep maybe an arm's length back, but keep an eye on all this? This is crazy.
Well, Mick, Mark Twain once observed that I feel like the boy who stubbed his toe, and that I was, it hurt too much to laugh, but I'm too big to cry. And I watched this political season, and you just shake your head. I've never seen the like of it.
Yeah.
Because, in a way, everybody thinks these are really unconventional campaigns, but maybe they're not.
This is the result of something. What's this the result of? What caused this in American society to have a campaign like this?
Well, campaigns always go where the technology is going. We know that. So when TV took hold, campaigns went to TV. When the internet took hold, we started to try and figure it out. And finally, we've got candidates like Bernie Sanders during the primaries and Donald Trump now who figured out how to make the most out of new media and out of free media. But they're kind of reaching the limit of the ability to use that tool. But the deeper concern for this campaign is what people are talking about. And there's a populist streak that's run through both parties. Mm-hmm. There are angry people on the left and on the right. They're tired, they're upset, they don't feel like they've got opportunity. And they've been attracted to the angriest voices in politics. Now, it's not that most people are angry, but enough people are angry to have shifted the debate. And we've been here before, and we'll go here again, and hopefully we'll make our way out. But there are issues in America that people have wanted dealt with for decades that are just not being addressed.
And there are splits inside both parties that are pretty vast.
Yeah, and it has to do with earnings, it has to do with immigration, it has to do with fairness. Everybody, we look at the issues in the minority communities regarding policing, and we also forget there was a lot of concern on the right about the militarization of police. So even on issues where we think it only exists on one side of the political spectrum, it's there for everybody. And these problems, we have a Congress and a president who have been unable to work together and unable to address basic problems. It ripples down to the states, and everybody's frustrated.
Is it sound political advice, generally speaking, for a candidate that has been hit in the nose by what one might call an unfair punch or a very excitable punch, to feel obliged to hit back with just as much or more?
Well, I mean, we're talking about in the abstract, that's the human instinct, right?
Yep.
Which is when struck to strike back. On the other hand, I've always felt that in politics, there are two schools of thought. Jim Carville, Bill Clinton's old campaign manager, said, never leave any charge unanswered, right?
Yeah.
Always answer every charge, always push back, and always push back. But if you're going to punch back, you have to punch back smart. You don't flail blindly. And when I look at this particular campaign, we have what should have been an incredible opportunity for the Republican Party. And we should note that at time of taping, things can change very quickly at this time of year. I mean, that period after Labor Day is when a campaign kind of sets up, but it's also the last chance to move stuff. The Trump campaign is engaged in repeated response, but often in a flailing manner. For the Clinton campaign, you'd expect them to push back against some of the things directed at them. And they're very measured, and it's kind of like watching, you remember when we were young, Muhammad Ali was in his prime. If he needed to, he'd change his strategy based upon his opponent. Rope-a-dope was effective for him against hard punchers, make them punch out. Hillary Clinton, in this analogy, is just letting Trump and the right punch themselves out because it's an undisciplined, unfocused flailing.
Well, let me ask you, do you see any sea change between now and November that is likely to occur?
Oh, probably not a sea change. If we look sitting here, roughly at Labor Day, what we see is a situation where the continuity of the Clinton lead has been very stable. And despite repeated efforts to knock her off her stride with different controversial issues, that lead has not been diminished. Every time we think that Donald Trump has straightened himself out and we're promised that he is going to work, what was that I heard the other day, Reince Priebus saying he will be working from prepared remarks. We're hoping he'll stay on script. There's been no indication of his ability to discipline himself and close the gap and create more confidence. Donald Trump, as of Labor Day, ran behind Hillary Clinton on every issue people cared about. And when you lead on no issues, it's hard to win. And when you're a Republican and you're trailing a Democrat on national defense and security and the economy, you've run out of things to be a Republican for.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about state politics. Where is the state of Oklahoma headed? Do you see any shifts? Do you see us moving one way or the other?
Well, I tell you, I think we've gone about as far right as we can. I mean, there's not much right left over there. That's part of the problem. But you look at what happened in Kansas this past summer in the primaries, where nearly 20 Republican incumbents were beaten in party primaries by moderates, and the prospect of another 20 incumbents maybe being beaten in the general election. Kansas is where we're headed next fiscally as a state, if we're not careful. Our legislature has been a little more responsible in trying to at least stabilize the revenue situation, given they're doing it with Band-Aids, and stabilize the spending cuts. But people want more government than they're getting. It's not that they're walking around asking for big government, but they expect the basics and they're not getting them. They want their schools open 5 days a week. They want EMS service. They want the 5 basic things every city is supposed to provide, right, Mick? Which is safe streets, garbage pickup, good schools, these kind of things. We're at the point where we wonder if the state of Oklahoma can do this.
As a person who kind of studies politics and all aspects of it, What are your comments about Oklahoma's political, about the Constitution and the way it's set up our government, the relationship between the legislature and the governor, the ability to get an initiative petition on a ballot? What's your comments on all of that?
Well, it's good that we have initiative petition because it allows the public to step forward and do things, and we vote on a lot of stuff. But most of the initiative and referendum we see come from the legislature rather than from the people. We have 779 this year, which is a citizen initiated citizen initiative for the penny sales tax. I actually do think we need to make it a little easier to get things on the ballot because the public has good ideas that get stalled by the legislature. I think we need to do some things in the legislature that quite simply would make for a better legislature regardless who controls it. And one is what's called a gavel bill, which guarantees every lawmaker to get one piece of legislation heard on the floor and debated. So for example, for that crew that was pushing civil asset forfeiture last session, they could have said, well, we only want one bill heard and that's it. Win or lose, at least it'll be debated. So this is a tool that simply opens up democracy a little bit. It doesn't shift the legislature in one direction or another, but it gets issues aired.
What about the governor and the legislature and how those powers are divided up?
Well, if you look, it's actually the kind of balance we see in most states, right? Which is we have a governor with some appointive power, with a line item veto. There are areas where governors have got a lot of latitude in terms of appointing a shadow cabinet, things like this. If I were personally reforming Oklahoma, I would have fewer statewide elected officials. I would have a governor and an attorney general probably an auditor. And then the rest I would leave to the governor to point out in an executive cabinet and use that as an excuse to reorganize government, maybe cut down on the commissions.
To what extent, well, first of all, does Kansas have a balanced budget requirement?
Oh yeah.
And to what extent are their problems due to influence by their governor?
Well, it's definitely Sam Brownback and also the legislature they had. These were folks who proposed a very radical downsizing of state government. Governor Fowling came to the table last session with a proposal to maintain government and to actually increase revenue, which is different from Sam Brownback. But we look at her approval ratings, while not nearly as bad as Brownback's, she nonetheless suffered from the inability to make a deal, the inability to save services. We need to move past Band-Aids and stopgaps and sit down and seriously talk about the organization of state government, how we budget, how we tax, and what we want to do. I mean, may as well get really unpopular. We need to consolidate school districts. We need to look at the organization of higher education. We need to reorganize counties. We need to free the cities more and give them more latitude to act because the cities are the place where stuff gets done right now in Oklahoma.
All right. Keith Gaddie is with the Political Science Department at the University of Oklahoma. We'll have more with Keith right after this.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to the Set of the Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Our guest is Keith Gaddie, a political scientist at the University of Oklahoma.
Keith, you hear a lot of the commentators on the national shows talk about swing states.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about what constitutes a swing state. Why do we have in our system of the Electoral College swing states? Just kind of give us a lecture on swing states, if you will.
Well, in a nutshell, a swing state is a state that's competitive for either party. And it's also a state that you need to win in order to win the presidency. It's one of those body of states that are right there at midfield that you have to capture to win, okay? And the reason we have them is that not all states are made the same. They have different political cultures. Some are more homogenous, some are more heterogeneous. Oklahoma is a historically conservative and populist state and heavily Republican now. So we're less likely to swing to the Democrats than most any state out there, except maybe Idaho. Right? Or Wyoming. That's about it. We're as Republican as it gets. But swing states are typically defined as states that neither party is winning by more than about 2.5 percentage points. Okay, so they're closely contested. And looking into the election this year, most of the swing states were sort of leaning Democratic, and the argument for Mr. Trump's campaign was he would broaden the map, which meant that he would shift the swing states back to the GOP and even go in and take the fight to Democrats in historically Democratic areas or areas that lean more heavily Democratic. What's happened instead is most all of those swing states have consolidated more heavily Democratic, at least as of Labor Day. And the states that were leaning Republican have become more highly competitive in swing. So we've discovered some states we never expected to be swing states to suddenly be swing states like Arizona and Georgia. Now, both will probably be there for the Republicans in the end, but what we're discovering is that to the extent that the map's been rewritten and broadened, it was broadened for the Democrats rather than for the Republicans. The door could swing two ways, and it swung to the left. So,
do you see any difference in Oklahoma in how the presidential election is likely to come out? I mean, for past, as long as I can remember, it's been heavily Republican. You still expect it to be that way?
Oh yeah, I mean, we can call this one right now. I mean, the last time
77 counties.
Maybe not 77. Hillary Clinton can make some inroads in some areas, and let's remember, Barack Obama won the city of Oklahoma City twice. So, and the diversity of the metros continues to grow, which can make them more competitive for Democrats. So counties who went for Joe Dorman could go for Hillary Clinton, for example. So 77 for 77, maybe not this time. Republican, yeah, definitely. The last time a Democrat won Oklahoma, I wasn't born. It was 1964. It's been a little while, right? It's all.
That was our first verdict show.
But it's will Trump run as strong as other Republicans have historically? Maybe not quite as much. The Libertarians are on the ballot this year, so Gary Johnson holds out the possibility of running in double digits in Oklahoma. So, there are things that can happen, but one of those things is not Hillary Clinton winning this state.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about on a broader basis the reaction that we have seen in off presidential years. So whoever candidate we elect in a presidential year, it seems like 2 years later, the electorate comes back and votes for the other party. Is that something that's fairly recent in the last few years, or is that historic? Has it always been that way?
It's been that way at least since the Civil War. It's been called surge and decline is one theory of that, which is that there's a surge for a party in the presidential election based upon turnout, excitement over the presidential candidate, and then the same people don't show up at the midterm because turnout falls by about half. What we've got now is something more institutionalized in the United States, which is the electorate in the U.S. looks more Democratic and liberal in presidential years because Black and Hispanic turnout are higher, for example, and young voter turnout is higher. And then we get to the midterm and a bunch of old white guys like us show up and vote, right? So the electorate is older, more conservative, less diverse. So Republicans do better in the midterm, and this has been the cycle for a while. Oddly enough, Oklahoma is kind of contra to this, which is the Democrats actually seem to do a little better in the midterm, but then they're hurting in the presidential year. But I think part of that is due to the historic unpopularity of President Obama in the last couple of cycles. and the presence of Brad Henry on the midterm in 2006. So
It seems like every election year we hear that this is going to be when young people come out to vote.
yeah.
And are we still going to be saying that after November?
Well, they did it for the last 2 presidentials, so they'll probably show up again. I mean, I came straight up here from lecturing 275 students down on campus, and given college students are not all young voters. In fact, most young voters in Oklahoma don't go to college, okay? But yeah, young voters will probably show up.
Is their generation, though, long term going to expect to vote on their phone? Are they still going to see the need to congregate at the local filling station or the local church or wherever it is that the voting booth is held?
Well, Mick, I was thinking about this driving up here, is that, I think that headed towards mobile voting, internet voting is the logical next thing, as long as you can account for who it is and keep somebody from double voting, okay? As long as you can secure the transmission of that vote, you should be able to do that, because you think about it, used to be, we go back 200 years, you'd go up a river from the Gulf Coast and you'd hit a waterfall, and that's where you'd have to stop and unload your boat and load it again and go up the river. You built a town there, right? And then commerce grew up around, and that's where people came to, so you held the election there because that's where they were, right? And then, we expand and we grow and we expand and we grow, and then we discover that we have this thing called literacy. We can have people write down a ballot and they can vote. And then we discover they can mail in a ballot, and Oregon's had mail-in elections forever. As long as the communication secures the logical next thing. I mean, I assume a retinal scan or something like that to verify you and you hit your ballot could take care of it. Flip side is these online education systems that we work with, that I teach with, I have a textbook that has one of these, frustrate some people. There are plenty of young people out there that are simply incompetent with technology, okay? And I think you have the biggest challenge is getting older voters used to the idea you want to do this thing this way. One thing we saw in a Colorado study done by Rice University was people who were given a mail-in ballot, if they were historically a likely voter, they got their mail-in ballot, instead of mailing it back, they came and voted it in person, because voting for them was a communitarian experience. That the marketplace and seeing other people, that voting was sort of civic communion, and it was something better served done with other people.
We have about 2 minutes left. In the past, I remember a couple of events that really cost presidential candidates presumably a lot of votes. One was George H.W. Bush saying, "Read my lips, no new taxes." That came to haunt him later as a broken promise or a broken commitment. The other was Michael Dukakis riding in a tank, which got a lot of hilarious comment and seemed to damage his candidacy. I see things today going on 5 times as bad as that. Are they going to damage anybody's candidacy?
You have to wonder if we're not in the realm of the absolutely absurd. But every political consultant knows there are 2 rules for your candidate. And Mick, you know this one well, right? Yeah. No food, no hats, right? No food, no hats. Of course, Trump wears a hat all the time, so I guess that one's out the window. But yeah, I mean, the incredibly absurd missteps happening by these politicians, and you honestly sit and you look at this campaign, especially from the Republican Party, from the Trump campaign. You look at the Trump campaign. I'll even do my Republican friends the favor of not calling it the Republican campaign. Look at the Trump campaign. And it is like they are trolling the electorate, trolling the public, trolling the media, intentionally setting up embarrassments for everybody. I have never seen anything like this. You want to nominate the guy for a reality show Emmy based upon this ongoing performance in Trump the candidate. So I've never seen the like.
It's like nothing I've ever heard. What are your students telling you about the campaign? If they're paying attention for the first time, we just have a few seconds left.
I think they deserve better. I think they'd like to have something a little more serious than this.
And we probably ought to make that the final comment, because I think there's a lot of people out there that feel that same way. We'll have a final word after this. Keith, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks,
Pleasure.
Keith.
There are now 11 million of us who live here and work here. I was 15 when I came here 6 years ago. I raised my family here. I drive my truck to my job every day. The only difference between now and 6 years ago, I do it legally. I wanted to. Because this is my home.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be Mom and Dad to me.
You have children coming from a different lifestyle, different mindset. You have to open your arms and really do what you have to do to have that child become a part of your family. And if it's more patience, that's what you do. Kids gotta know they can trust you. And that's what we try to do with these kids.
You will always be Mom and Dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're wrapping up a show with political scientist Keith Gaddie.
Well, Keith's always generous with his time, and he's got the most current information available. It will be interesting to see how his assessment of the political arena turns out, but it's going to continue to be a rough ride till November.
We're going to have to get Keith back on another show and talk about the actual election and voting process. You know, currently we have, primaries by party, and then we go to another level, and some people would say that, we can do better than that. We can consolidate it. We can get people's thoughts in one ballot opportunity, and other states have done it. So I look forward to that opportunity. Keith has some website information. You can reach it at the university, ou.edu, and then find Keith from there. And then we have a website, theverdict.tv. But that's going to do it for this edition of The Verdict. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next week.